Hello, Blazer fans. Welcome to our first video podcast or video mailbag video, really first video of the season. I'm Sam Tung along with Dave Deckard, editor of Blazers Edge. Want to welcome you to, again, our first video of the year. We're going to be periodically doing these videos to talk about Blazer news, any NBA-related information. So welcome to our first day of the regular season. Dave, great to have you here. And how's everything going? Happy regular season first day of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much for me the third most exciting day of the year. I've got to count Christmas in there because I'm a sucker for Christmas, especially since I have kids. And if the Blazers make the playoffs, that is the most exciting day, period, when the playoffs start and hope is new and you start dreaming about what happens if you get to the second round and beyond. But other than that, other than Santa Claus or the playoffs fairy, this is unrivaled as far as the year goes, opening day of the season, and it should be a very exciting and interesting one. And so let's just get right into it.
So part of doing these videos is an additional part of your beginning of season coverage. Obviously, Chris Lucia has been doing all of the previews for all of the teams, all sorts of coverage on Blazers Edge today. So if you haven't checked it out yet, right after you're done watching this video, check out all of that information from Ben, Dave, and I, and Chris as well. So one thing that Dave, we wanted to talk about first off was, yes, the regular season is starting in just a couple hours, or if you're watching this video, it might even be sooner than that. But one thing that we wanted to first recap was the preseason and a couple of your thoughts, your takes on how the preseason went for the Trailblazers these last couple weeks.
Yeah, it was a very interesting preseason. I think they revealed quite a few things. Obviously, the new defense was the key, Robin Lopez staying down low, but rebounding was also quite a revelation, wasn't it? That they were able to do so well, and they were able to garner that many boards against a variety of opponents speaks well of what happens when you actually put a big man in the middle and let him work. So Lopez, definitely positive check mark. I mean, we saw his strengths and weaknesses, but certainly his strengths came to the fore. And that's exciting for Blazer fans to see, I think.
And the other thing that we were talking a little bit before this video too is, you know, on the positive side, you do have all of these the new guys coming in, a lot of chemistry being built in the preseason. But one thing that was kind of a negative, or at least a concerning part of the preseason, was the fact that the defense seemed like it lacked a little bit. Your thoughts on the way that the defense played in the preseason, and maybe some things that we can see over the next couple of weeks in terms of improvement.
Well, I'm not sure it lacked so much as it changed. I mean, they did well in what they're trying to do, which is a pretty basic defense where, again, you keep your center in the middle, and you depend on your wings to rotate, to dive, to cover the picks, and, you know, cover the men as best as they can out there without making your center come out and commit. Now, the Blazers are fairly mobile and have some fairly good defenders in the starting lineup, so that should work pretty well, as long as those perimeter players can keep from putting too much pressure on Robin Lopez. The danger is you leave guys out there on an island, or you leave them out there scrambling, and too many people get past them, and then Lopez, who has a little bit of problem with being not so fleet of foot, ends up having to rotate to cover their mistakes, and then he picks up a lot of fouls or just doesn't get over to make the play. He's not the kind of guy who's going to come and erase shots for you or erase your mistakes. The perimeter people have to help him just like he's helping them. Now, the starting lineup, that should probably do all right. The question will be when you start putting the bench backcourt in there, you start looking at Mo Williams, you start looking at Earl Watson, you start looking at C.J. McCollum, Will Barton, et cetera, et cetera. Those guys are going to make mistakes. Those guys can't be on an island. What is going to happen when the Blazers don't cover well on the perimeter and they start letting people leak through?
I think one of the biggest storylines too, Dave, is the fact that one kind of an ongoing theme over this offseason has really been about Damian Lillard's development as a defender over the last couple months, and you alluded to it, the fact that his perimeter defense is going to have a humongous impact on the way that Aldridge and Lopez are able to defend on the interior. We heard from Wesley Matthews how important that is. Having Lopez is going to be for him as an individual defender. Batum a lot more soft-spoken, but surely he's going to have similar, be aided in a similar way. But you have to think, though, that the way that Lillard plays defensively might even be the biggest storyline entering the season.
That will certainly be a tipping point. I mean, the thing about defense, as I've said many times, it's like a dam. If 4/5 of your dam holds, your dam didn't hold. So all 5 guys have to be able to play together and commit individually to their responsibilities. Now, they can cover for each other a little bit, but basically if one guy, like Lillard, is always letting his guy through, then what the other 4 players do doesn't really matter. And you just hope that, you know that Lillard has taken that responsibility upon himself from what he said. You hope that the actions and his ability are able to follow the words.
Well, an interesting preseason to be sure, but now with opening day arriving, a couple big storylines that we wanted to cover here today, Dave. The first one was really from about a week ago, talking about Joel Freeland replacing Myers Leonard in the rotation. Not replacing him, but moving up on that rotation ladder. Myers Leonard didn't get a ton of playing time last year. Still a young player, but it might even, it talks some about the youth of Myers Leonard, but it really might even say more about the development of Joel Freeland here over the last couple of months since the end of last season.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are the Blazers emphasizing here with this move? Obviously, Myers Leonard is the better hope for the future. Myers Leonard has the higher ceiling. But right now, that doesn't matter because Joel Freeland plays better defense. He's more committed. And he's shown progress over the summer more than Leonard has. So Coach Stotts, I think, is sending a message. He's saying, look, whatever you think this season is about, here's what it's really about. We are going to win games. The guys who are going to help me win the most are going to play. I don't care what your name is, and I don't care what your reputation is. Thomas Robinson, C.J. McCollum, Will Barton, all those players. Doesn't matter. I'm going to play the guy who plays best. And if you are a young pup and you think you want minutes, that's the bar you have to clear. If Myers Leonard cannot clear the Joel Freeland bar, he cannot get on the court. And I think that was probably a wake-up call to Leonard. Not a rookie anymore, not a first-round draft pick anymore. You have to play to get your sneakers on the floor.
And I think that that's something that we're going to see a lot of this year, I'm sure, as Stotts over the preseason tried a whole bunch of different rotations, some that most were kind of even surprised by. So I think that that's going to be an example, another example of seeing Joel Freeland being able to jump Myers Leonard in the rotation. How much of that, too, do you think, Dave, we talked a lot about defense, how much of that do you think is defense-related in the fact that this is a team that second unit is probably going to struggle on the defensive side. It's going to be important to have a guy like Joel Freeland, and maybe that was something that over the offseason he improved defensively, and that might be the reason why he's going to get more of these minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the bench, you can't not play Mo Williams, right? You got to put him in. Darrell Wright, you're not so concerned about. He's a pretty good defender, but then any other guard you put in is not going to be great. So you've got the backcourt hinged on offense, basically. That's how they're getting their minutes. What are you going to do in the front court then? You're going to throw in another offensive player who doesn't play defense real well? Well, then you're basically depending solely on outscoring the opposition. Even with the Blazers' somewhat improved firepower, that is just not going to happen. So you put in better, more solid players on defense in the front court. That leaves the backcourt free to do what they do best. Although we should hasten to say that a move on opening day is not binding on all 82 games. That this could change next week. And if Myers Leonard works hard or Joel Freeland doesn't work out, this is fluid. But remember, too, despite all the hype about the moves this summer, the Blazers are still really depending on 4, maybe 5 players to anchor them. Everybody else is interchangeable, and nobody else matters as much as those 4. I mean, Damian Lillard, Wesley Matthews, Nicola Batum, LaMarcus Aldridge. If those guys don't carry the team. Nobody else is gonna. If they do, then you can interchange a lot of other people as the need arises.
Another big storyline from the offseason was related to Thomas Robinson and the trouble that he got in with the law just a couple of days ago. 107 miles an hour, Dave. That's pretty fast, especially in a state that's what has some of the lowest speed limits in the country. But one thing that he tweeted afterwards is, my first and last speeding ticket. We saw from Ben that he had posted something similar when he was in Houston, I believe, his first and last of a different variety. So is this something that Blazer fans have kind of been torched by these types of incidents in the past? Is this something that maybe we're overreacting to, or is this a legitimate concern?
Both. I mean, you're not happy about this, and obviously the PR angle and the responsibility angle and stuff like that. At the same time, Portland's unique history with run-ins with the law and jailblazers and what have you certainly contribute to the reaction. I'm inclined to give the guy more or less a pass since nothing happened, terribly averse. It's probably okay unless it happens again. The concern I hope he has is not so much for ethics or anything like that. He's just got to realize how important his body is. I mean, he doesn't have to have an accident, full-blown at 107 miles an hour. What if he just slows down and clips a curb or clips a guardrail or something like that, and his knee, raises up and bangs the steering wheel? That could keep him out for a year. Crack a kneecap, and his career might never be the same. So, I'm hoping these guys walk around basically in those big padded suits whenever they're not on the court to stay away from injuries. You certainly don't want to court anything that's going to run the risk of causing more. And I think there are probably some clauses about this, like motorcycle riding and skydiving and what have you, in their contracts where insurance won't pay for it. They have the right to terminate you. I'm not sure if 107 miles an hour is in there, but if it's not, maybe it should be.
And that's, I don't know how fast you've been in a car, but it's kind of one of those things where when you're going that fast, it's something that, like you mentioned, it doesn't even have to be you that's making the mistake. It can be anyone on the road or anything on the road. And that's kind of where you go from a normal fender bender to a pretty critical accident. So, from my standpoint, it just seems like you mentioned a little bit about the insurance and things like that. I think that that's one aspect of it, but at the same time, we want to make sure that this guy is healthy. We want to make sure that this guy doesn't hurt himself at the very least. So that's something to certainly pay attention to, but I don't think and hope that it isn't going to be a recurring issue. I wasn't sure, if this is something to be too worried about. But I suppose this is a world of second chances, or a country of second chances. He says it's his first and last, and we will learn soon enough whether or not that is the case. Dave, we'll
see how many things he runs through first and last. I mean, right. Is this his bucket list here? First and last this, first and last that? We'll have to see.
Yeah. First $1,100 driving ticket. That's
that's right. That's pocket change, baby, in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly.
That's less than a tire on his car.
Right. He needs to play 5 minutes tonight, and he might be able to make it back. I know one part of this broadcast, or the reason that we're doing this broadcast, is we're doing a lot more multimedia stuff on the site. That's why I'm here in part, as well as doing some of the blogging. Obviously, another big piece of that is you brought Chris in to do all of the game previews this year. He's done all of the team previews, which you can check out on Blazers Edge. They're all in a thread, so if you're ever curious, especially early in the season while we're kind of getting back into the groove, if you ever need to check out any of those game previews, they're a really great breakdown of not only how the team is going to how the team fared last season and kind of some storylines into this year, but also roster acquisitions, things like that. So if you're saying, oh, I didn't know that guy played for that team, that's the best place to check it out for that. But part of that, too, is, Dave, you're now going to be sort of stepping aside from your role of doing the game previews and handing the baton to Chris. However, as an avid Blazers Edge reader myself, I had to at least get a little bit of what Dave Deckard thinks is going to happen here this evening against the Phoenix Suns. So give us the 1 minute version of an actual game preview. And again, if you want to check out the full version, Chris will have that up on the site. But Dave, your brief thoughts on the game tonight against Phoenix.
Yeah, and Chris does a wonderful job, and I certainly don't want to step on his toes, so I'll just keep it brief. The Blazers should kill him. I mean, they don't have experienced big men anymore. They traded away most everybody. They're accumulating draft picks. I don't want to accuse them of tanking, but between you and me, they're tanking. So the Blazers should absolutely mow over them with opening night energy and a reasonably full roster. I don't see any way the Blazers lose this game. It's one of those things where you kind of look for systematic things rather than the final score. You look to see if the Blazers can score in the paint at all against what's sure to be a relatively weak and confused defense. You look to make sure the rebounding holds up. You look to make sure the turnovers aren't at the astronomical rate that they were in the preseason, because that's going to be a problem if that keeps up. You look to see if the Blazers are containing people in transition. I mean, the Blazers are probably not going to be real big transition scorers. That's not their game. They're not set up to do that. But if they're going to play that way, they have to keep the other team from running out. They just cannot afford to give up 10 points a night on the break. That's going to be like a slow drain that's going to make it hard for them to win games. Now, in Phoenix, will it make it hard enough? No. They should beat the Suns. But you can't play Phoenix 81 more times. So look for the systemic stuff, especially the stuff that was a burr under their saddle in preseason. See if that keeps up. If they fix that, you knock on wood and hope it keeps up against the Clippers. If they didn't fix it, if they're bombing against Phoenix, boy, you start to itch a little bit about this.
Another thing too, Dave, and I wanted your thoughts on this. It seems like so much of I mentioned it a little bit earlier how Damian Lillard's defense is a really kind of a big storyline here this season, and playing against an athlete like Eric Bledsoe, he might not be polished like a Derrick Rose or a Russell Westbrook or a Chris Paul, obviously, but at the same time, he does provide a different style of point guard and kind of this style that's becoming much more prevalent in the league. You have to think that paying attention to him or how he does defensively against a lesser opponent, but a guy that might have or does have equal athletic skills and ability as Eric Bledsoe, that certainly has to be something to pay attention to here tonight.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because this is Bledsoe's dream, right? Not necessarily to play for the Suns, but what are they going to do other than say, hey, baby, do everything you want to do, anything you can to score and whatever else you want to do, this is your team. So Bledsoe will have free reign, what he's always dreamed of. It'll be up to Lillard to kind of contain that a little bit, although, frankly, that's what Lillard was doing last year with the Blazers. He had more or less free reign, had a little more responsibility to players like Aldridge than Bledsoe will. But in any case, it'll be a nice duel of the point guards, and we'll see who comes out on top. But I don't know. It's just hard. Really, what it'll tell you, I think, some of this defensive stuff will be whether the Blazers can really live with this lineup and depend on Lillard to defend, or whether they're just going to have to say, Damian's going to be our all-star scorer, and we're just going to build a lot of defenders around him and compensate the same way we tried to do for instance, Brandon Roy.
One thing that I wanted to cover too in this video, shifting gears just a little bit, while we have a chance and the season technically hasn't, well, I guess it has started, but for the Blazers, it hasn't. So we still get these last couple minutes of preseason talk. I wanted to, along with all of the previews that Chris has done, all of the talk that you have done, all of the coverage that Ben has provided, I think that we're starting to get a pretty good sense, at least in terms of around the league, what types of teams are contending for these last couple of playoff spots. Obviously, Portland is in that category. I just wanted to ask you point blank, Dave, and I hope it doesn't blindside you, but which one of these last couple teams, between the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Trailblazers, or not the...
And the Nuggets.
And the Nuggets, absolutely. Which one of these last couple of teams do you think is really going to be kind of the biggest contender and the biggest match for the Trailblazers as they sort of fight for this last playoff spot?
You got to watch out for the teams with veteran presence, and you also have to watch out because prognosticators, as we've talked about before, when a team starts falling some, prognosticators will look at the direction they're going and just bury them, as opposed to a young upcoming team which may be rising a little bit but might not rise as much as people think. People tend to overreact to direction instead of absolute talent. So I think you watch out for teams like Dallas and Denver. Even though everybody's kind of burying them, they have a lot of veteran players. They might not be playoff worthy. They might not be, Western Conference title contenders. That said, over 82 games, if you are deep, if you know what you're doing, and you've been to the rodeo a few times, you have an advantage because you can curb some of the streaks and ups and downs that a young team like the Blazers will inevitably experience. So I think you really have to pin at least those two teams, Dallas and Denver, as serious contenders. The Pelicans, I don't know. They're an odd mix, and they're also very young. They could get hot, just like the Blazers could get hot, but I think that's what they depend on. Timberwolves, I kind of like them. It'll depend on health. Who knows? The Lakers, it depends on when they get Kobe back and what he decides to do and what the refs decide to do with them. So, I mean, any of them, it's really a big, mushy beanbag of teams there, and we're going to see who spills out on top. But frankly, the same is true of the top of the conference. It's like the West is really funny. You got 3 tiers. You got mostly kind of good contenders to get killed by Miami eventually. You got other middle teams that are struggling for 2 playoff spots, and then you got the tankers. And that's the West.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask that question was I have read a lot of what you've said about the Trailblazers, and I wanted to at least get a little bit of a sense of, who you thought some of the competition was. It's interesting, too, you talk about Dallas. I know I wrote about it a couple of weeks ago. There's a difference between signing veteran guys in order to get a superstar later on, and then there's signing guys without having that in the back of your mind. And you really saw with Dallas this offseason when they signed guys like Monte Ellis, when I don't think they would have made a signing like that last season when they were pursuing Dwight Howard. So it really seems like they to me seem like the biggest competition, and it's interesting to hear you sort of echo that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have Dirk Nowitzki. He's still good. And you have guys who have played historically pretty well, a lot of veterans. Now, the Blazers are eventually going to be a much better team. I think if you look in a 3-year window, you'd rather be the Blazers right now. At least they have more options than the Mavericks. But this isn't 3 years from now, and this isn't played over the course of 3 years. It's today, and you have to face them mano a mano. And you know what? In an 82-game duel, I don't doubt that the Mavericks could come out with a better record than the Blazers. I don't think it'll be by much. I mean, I think one of the things that people miss, too, everybody's upset with the national guys. They're saying, oh, they picked the Blazers 11th. How dare you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? The difference between 7th and 11th in the conference could be 2 or 3 games. I mean, it's literally that amorphous. You don't, it's not like the 7th team is going to win 50 and the 11th team is going to win 30. They all may end up around, 39 to 43, 44 wins. That could easily happen.
Last thought before we close this thing out and let people peruse the rest of the content on the site here today. Wanted to, any other major storylines? I know opening night is the really big storyline of the day, but is there any other thing that maybe you think is sort of flying under the radar right now that you're really paying attention to, more specifically in the first couple of weeks of the season?
For the Blazers?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are basically 3 or 4 things I'm watching. I'm watching how Lopez operates in the defense against teams that are really trying now and game planning, especially teams that try to draw him into a pick and roll up high. How are the Blazers going to compensate for that? How are they going to rotate? How are they going to protect him, right? And make really the best use of him. Second, like I said, I'm watching those turnovers, and I'm watching them really hard. I'm watching transition points. I'm watching paint points. I understand that the Blazers' shots are not going to fall every night. That's okay. But they cannot be giving up easy buckets to the opponent while the shots aren't falling. Otherwise, anything the bench is going to do doesn't matter. And I think those are the systemic, those are the fundamental issues that they have to address in the first few weeks. And if those go well, then you can start building on the second tier. If you're doing all right on those, I think you don't have to worry. You can be 500 team or maybe above, right? But if you have to spend a month or 2 or 3 fixing those, or if you just can't fix them, then it's going to be a long season. So right now they're showing their hand early. Other teams are going to try to game plan for them, and we'll see what happens when the stuff gets real.
Well, any other questions? You know, I was able to sort of get first crack at you here on the video mailbags, but I wanted to also mention before we wrap this thing up, Dave, that if people want to be sending in any mailbags, and that is both, you know, send in a mailbag, and now there's 2 ways that those might get answered. First, obviously, on this video portion, and then also Dave is going to be doing his normal writing mailbag section. So as usual, or if you're new to the site, sending your mailbags to blazersub@gmail.com. That's blazersub@gmail.com. And again, they're eligible for all sorts of coverage, and send them in. And the other thing too is, Dave, you and I talked briefly about it. Part of what I'm doing with the website is looking more at national news. Obviously, you're a big NBA fan as well. So not only things that are Blazer related, but if you have any questions that are NBA related that might have a Blazer twist to them, that's something that we're interested to answer as well. blazersub@gmail.com, the place that you can send those. So Dave, that pretty much wraps it up. We're getting pretty close now to tip-off. Certainly exciting. You mentioned one of the 2 or 3 best days of the year. Really, one of the 2 or 3 best weeks of the year in sports, but really capped off by this excitement and exciting start to the Trailblazer season.
Absolutely, and it's going to be a wild ride. We're going to see different things this season than we have any of the past few. So buckle up and enjoy it. We'll see where it goes.
And that's going to do it for our first video mailbag. Again, emails to blazersub@gmail.com. We'll be breaking everything down, both preseason stuff, obviously wrapping that stuff up, regular season stuff, and moving on through the next couple of weeks. Remember, blazersedge.com, the place you can get it. For Dave Deckard, I am Sam Tung. Thanks so much for joining us here on this video. We'll catch you all soon.